Thank you very much. I can't believe I got bumped for John Swinney. Whatever next, you know, the indignity of it all. Anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this. I said this afternoon now. The Cairngorms National Park is a national asset for nature and people. It's a dynamic economy. It's underpinned by land management at its core. We have a very close relationship with Scottish Land and Estates within the park and do a lot of work with them and with the constituent estates within the park. Roughly speaking, about 75% of the national park is privately owned. We also have large NGO holdings, RSPB, National Trust within that, and we also have some significant public land holdings at Cairngorm Mountain from HIE, Glenmore, slightly expanded Glenmore from the Forestry Commission, and SNH land holdings as well. It is a diverse setup within the park, lots of different estates with lots of different priorities, lots of different things that they focus on. We have to work with everyone. That's our side of things from the Cairngorm National Park Authority. It's about trying to work with everyone in partnership to try and bring to fruition the things that are set out in the National Park Partnership Plan and wider government policy. Everyone knows the Cairngorms, incredible landscapes. Roughly speaking, 25% of the UK's endangered species are within the Cairngorms. It's got ancient woodlands. It's got about 1.5 million visitors per year and about 18,000 residents. It's quite a unique place in terms of, as I said, the wildlife that you see within the place, in terms of some of the things that people can do. And I think this is one of the reasons that it's an incredibly popular place. It has a vast variety of things for people to do. Strathspey, Deeside, Athol, etc. all provide lots of different opportunities for people to enjoy. There's some more pictures of people out and about within the park. And recreation and tourism is a massive part of the economy of the area. Just to say something about the overall economy, which is, in general, it's in good health. It's quite a dynamic economy. It's also quite different to other parts of rural Scotland. In terms of demography, young people come back much earlier into the Cairngorms National Park than they do across most parts of other rural Scotland. And we've got a very low rate of unemployment within the park. And again, it's starting to fall again now, and very high levels of employment. There's also an increasing population within the Cairngorms National Park. It's risen by 1,000 over the past decade, and it's projected to continue to increase over the next 10, 20, 30 years as well. So it's that balance that's very difficult in terms of how we take that forward, in terms of the conservation interests, the visitors that come to the area, the resident population, and the economic growth within the area. This is the overall makeup of the economy within the national park. You see tourism is a large entity, as is home ownership and construction, food and agriculture, whisky and drink, public sector and others. One of the things about that is that many estates contribute to a whole range of things within that. Most of those estates are involved in one way or another. These figures are about 5 or 6 years old, but they are getting redone at the moment for the economic strategy for the park. But one of the interesting things is, if you look at the employment within the park, we've got 9,500 people, roughly speaking, employed within the park. Tourism is a much higher level of employment than it is in terms of the gross value added, and that's one of the issues associated with tourism, and one of the things that we look at is in terms of some of the wage issues associated with tourism, and that also impacts on housing and how we provide enough housing at the right levels to be able to ensure, if you like, that we have the right housing in the right places for people. And just one final thing on the generalities. This is the influence of the Cairngorms National Park. This is the quarterly business survey that takes place in the park, done by the Cairngorms Business Partnership. It is focused on the tourism side, but again, it shows that in terms of the Cairngorms National Park as an attractor for people coming and an attractor for first-time customers and repeat customers, it has a big impact now in terms of as an entity and as a brand. National parks are starting, after a decade, to pick up that kudos within the tourism industry. We carried out the economic, social and environmental contribution of landowners in the Cairngorms National Park. Nice, small, catchy title we thought was the best way to go. Even has a subtitle, which is even longer, but I won't go into that. One of the main things for me was really to try and ensure that we know what's happening within the land management side within the park, about the land ownership, what's happening, because in effect, we need to work with the different estates, we need to work with Scottish Land and Estates, we need to work out where the opportunities are, where are the challenges, where are the things that estates are looking at, where are the things that we're looking at, and where those things cross over, and how we can work together to try and deliver on the conservation agenda, on visitor infrastructure, on rural development. These are the main things for us in terms of trying to work with people to make things happen. This is just a quick, rough map that shows the land ownership within the park. We have quite a lot of large landowners within the park, but many of the estates are owned in many different ways, and I think that's one of the things, that's the diversity within the park is quite interesting in terms of different landowners with different ways, agricultural tenants, sporting tenants, big NGO landowners, as I said, different aims, different objectives. Trying to work across that is interesting, I think would be the best way to put it, and some of the main issues for us, I suppose, are around the boundaries of estates and how different estates fit together within that pattern within the Cairngorms National Park. In terms of the survey, this is the total areas of hectares within the survey sample from the respondents, and you'll see that obviously managed moorland, rough grazing, and then conservation, commercial forestry, native woodlands. It's quite an interesting balance in terms of the respondents. It's saying, I should have said that roughly speaking, within the survey respondents, that's about 66%, roughly speaking, of the national parks area has been covered by people responding to the survey overall. One of the things that I should point out is that the conservation side of things is where people have primarily said that is the thing they do. There was obviously a lot of secondary things saying that they did conservation within the other areas that they responded on. This is just a quick map which is from pre the park extension, so I apologise that it doesn't cover Athol, but that's the last time we did the maps for the moorland. But it shows you roughly where the moorlands are within the national park. You'll see it's a big area within the national park is dominated by moorland management. And then these are the different management objectives from the people, from the respondents. So sporting is a high, agriculture, conservation is also high and medium, forestry, residential, and going down the way. So you'll see that there's quite an emphasis on what you say is the more traditional side of things, sporting, agriculture, forestry, etc. But again, tourism and leisure coming up as well, and residential within that. And aspired areas to increase or decrease within the national park. Again, renewables came out as a very high, tourism and leisure, forestry, conservation. So actually, it's more focused on the newer side of things in terms of where people are focusing their energies for the future. Those are the areas that they're looking to expand into. Overall, within the economy, there's some big numbers within the report. Again, a bit like what Rob said earlier, but I mean, in effect, one of the ones I think is quite interesting is the GVA. So the gross value added associated with the estates is roughly speaking about 22-23 million. And you take that, the GVA of the park being about 400 million, you can see the contribution of estates towards that total GVA figure. And there's also significant employment within the park as well associated with estates at roughly 778 jobs as well. This is about landowner confidence and sustainability of income levels. So you can see that in general, there's a general confidence around agriculture, forestry, sporting, tourism, residential, but there is also a minority who are not at all confident across a number of these areas as well. What I do think it shows is that, well, in general, there's a confidence in most of these areas. You know, I was relatively surprised by the outcome of that survey question. And one of the other areas that I think is interesting from us, because one of the things that we've just recently done is a capital investment plan for the national park, this is capital investment by landowners within the park. And again, expect to continue at a similar level, expect to be significantly higher than the norm, or higher than the norm is basically on the upside. So we're looking at capital investment from landowners within the park, capital investment hopefully from the public sector and from others within the park, and I think that gives a good overall approach. And you can see some of those capital investments, whether it be Crown Estate doing the work at Glenlivet on the bike trails, some of the work that Athol Estates have done in terms of visitor base and things like that. So there's capital investment coming through within the park, coupled with quite significant public investment in terms of shovel-ready funding of a couple of £1 million over the past 2 years in terms of visitor facilities and other things within the park. So capital investment, I think, is pretty key going forward in the future. And then this just shows you some of the income generation side of things. And again, agriculture, sporting at the top end, but also retail accommodation, residential accommodation are still relatively high as well. So again, it's a great diversity in terms of where income generation comes from estates across the park, but you can see the key sectors within that. And this just showed you some of the breakdown in terms of employment and landholdings, and you can see that tourism, leisure and sporting are generally in terms of the highest employers within the park, within estates. Total full-time employment of 419, part-time and seasonal, and you can also see from that the seasonal figures for sporting and tourism and leisure are relatively high within that, and that goes back to some of the things we said earlier about wages within the national park, and overall how does that fit into things like housing policy, etc. within the area. We also asked some questions from people about the environment side of things. These are just some of the survey responses, and again, it was a survey of people asking them their opinions, and basically one of the main things that showed was that there's a lot of interest and also a lot of things happening within the park, and I think there's some good high-profile examples. You need to look at some of the work that's been happening across estates within the park, and whether it's on a very large scale, such as Glenfeshie, some of the things that are happening in terms of some of the lower side of things, in terms of the SPA catchment initiative or the Pearls and Pearl work on D-side. There's a lot of good work ongoing within the park with estates on environmental considerations, and I think that's an area where the National Park Authority can work with estates and Scottish Land and Estates to really develop partnerships to make things happen, whether it be peatland restoration, native woodland expansion, whether we get involved in terms of SRDP delivery and making sure the right projects happen in the right place, I think is really key going forward. And we also need to take into account of what was said and what the findings were of the Rural Affairs Committee into deer management. And I think, again, the National Park Authority and Scottish Land Estates have a big opportunity to work with deer management groups through the Deer Advisory Group within the Cairngorms to really work on how do we implement those recommendations to make sure that deer management groups are doing the functions which they are desired to do. Again, these are just some graphs that show landowners' interest in woodland management, and you can see that a lot of people are already doing a number of these things, and also they're interested to do if funded. And again, I think that's about trying to ensure we have the right mechanisms within SRDP to actually make these things happen on the ground. And again, landscape's quite an interesting one, mainly because there's quite a lot of interest in doing it, but it's trying to find the mechanisms in terms of some of the funding mechanisms to allow it to happen. The landscape is one of these ones that doesn't get as high a profile as biodiversity and other things, and these are some of the things that I think would be interesting from a crossover between tourism and such like point of view. And finally, environmental contributions is about deer management. So why do people get involved in deer management? Sporting side of things, habitat management, forestry management, crop protection. So there's obviously quite a number of reasons why people can get involved in deer management. And again, the sort of exploration of that within the report will give us more idea of how we should interact with estates and how we should interact with Scottish Land and Estates to try and take forward some of those things that the Rural Affairs Committee set out. And I just put up, this is some of the work that's ongoing. The left-hand map shows woodland native woodland within the Cairngorms National Park, and also where it's being expanded over the next 5 years. There's within Cairngorms Nature, which is one of the big stretches within the park, there's 5,000 hectares of native woodland expansion over the next 5 years, and we've already got many of those bits in place, and it's being delivered by estates, mostly by the private sector, some by the NGOs, some by the public sector, but it's that partnership working across the park. And again, there's opportunities in terms of montane scrub and also some of the scrapes associated with the SPA catchment initiative. Then we get on to some of the findings that were to do with the social side of things within the report, and I think that's an interesting area in terms of how people interact with their local communities. Again, pretty crucial for us in terms of landowner relationship with communities and on the housing aspects. It's a real context for us in terms of making sure the right land supply comes forward to allow the right sort of housing to happen in the right place. A lot of the time, the landowners around villages are crucial to make sure that land supply comes forward in the right way and gives a long enough term housing supply so that places can grow in that incremental manner that allows them to survive, but doesn't also cause issues in terms of excessive building in terms of some of these places. So it's quite a delicate balance, but it's certainly one that we are keen to work with estates on. One of the things was about community engagement and involvement in decision making, we asked people, and it was quite an interesting one, this, because some of the informal side of things, I think there was a couple of quotes that was, I bump into people in the local shop. I'm not quite too sure that's where we were going with community involvement, but it's quite interesting in terms of, there's quite a high degree of involvement in community councils, quite a high degree of involvement in terms of open days and other things, and certain estates do a lot of this, but I think this is an area where, with the Community Empowerment Bill, there will probably be a need for us to get more engagement from the estates into some of those community processes within the park in terms of the community trusts and such like that have been set up throughout the park. So that's one for us to work on in terms of involvement within the park. So key findings from the survey. States provide employment in the Cairngorms National Park, roughly speaking 9% of the overall jobs are on estates, and contribute significantly to the economy, about 6% of GVA. That obviously then, there's other figures that you can then add on to that, to do with agriculture, to do with tenant sectors, to do with food and drink, etc., etc. This is purely about the estate side of things. Traditional land uses remain the mainstay and focus of landholdings economically in terms of the park. But there are, I suppose, the secondary side of things is residential property, tourism, leisure, etc., the other cornerstone that's coming through within the park, and obviously the economy within the park having that big tourism focus, also that's an issue in terms of how those are the sectors that are coming through. Again, the strong emphasis already in terms of native woodland enhancement and some of the biodiversity works, and a small number of the very large estates have a considerable impact on the overall figures within the report. So I think that is quite a crucial one when looking at the report. I should say that we're looking to have the report finalised within the next couple of weeks and have it out at that point. And I was just going to finish with terms of some of the work that SLE and the estates and CNPA get up to. We also asked for some feedback on the National Park Authority within the survey, which is always interesting to ask people what they think. So we got a wide variety of views. I think that would be a good way of putting it. In general, people were positive about the staff and how pragmatic they are in terms of trying to make some of these things happen. There was obviously feedback about trying to make the SRDP simpler and trying to make it something that people can get into. And then there was obviously comments about the planning side of things and about how we can ensure that the planning authority side meshes in with some of this stuff to do with economic development. So there's stuff for us to take away there and to think about how we can improve on those things. We do a lot of work with SLE, as was said. We jointly run the Land Management Forum. We have some of the landowner meetings as well within the park. SLE, a key partner within Cairngorms Nature. And again, Cairngorms National Park is one of the best places to deliver on a landscape scale within the whole of the UK, actually. We've got woodland expansion happening across many landholdings. We've got real joining up between different landholdings, and I think that's really crucial. So we're getting to do things at a landscape scale on conservation that you can't do in many other places. And then some of the things we've done jointly, Wildlife Estates Initiative was something that was piloted in the park, and we're still very much involved in that as it rolls out nationally. We're very keen on it, we're very supportive of it, but we want to see it start to deliver and to make sure we start to get back the monitoring and reporting on that in terms of what is actually happening out there to make sure that it's an initiative worth buying into, if you like, from the public point of view. We're involved in a huge range of different projects and things with different people, from wildcat projects, wetland and wader management, access management, visitor facilities, affordable housing. So that the amount of work between Scottish Land Estates, individual estates and the National Park is ongoing and is always good to have in place. And I think from the survey, some of the things that I've taken in terms of where we should focus and where priorities cross is things like capital investment, sharing ambitions for capital investment, looking at especially on visitor experience and infrastructure. We also do quite a lot of work actually in rural broadband as well, Community Broadband Scotland, and with some of the things that have already been set up within the park on that. I've mentioned the landscape scale conservation. I think that's a really important area. I think we have a whole new area to look at in terms of, it's been an ongoing issue and will continue to be, which is new approaches to housing delivery within rural Scotland, how we make sure we get the right houses in the right place. And again, communications engagement, I think there's a big issue there in terms of getting messages out about what is delivered out there. And we've already started to pull together what we were calling management statements, which have been done for individual estates, which will be going up on the Park Authority website as well. That's not to say we always agree on everything. We have different positions, Scottish Land Estates and the National Park Authority, on things like hill tracks. We still think there's an issue with hill tracks and the need to make sure that even if you disagree on whether they should be in the planning system or not, there's a need to make sure that under the current system that the design and guidance associated with those are followed so that we get the right quality within what are some of Scotland's most iconic landscapes. So, in conclusion, land managers are key partners in delivering the benefits the public want from national parks. We have a good pragmatic working relationship, I think, with a whole range of different landowners, managers, farmers, etc. within the park. And it's in our interest to keep working to make sure that land management of the park is seen to be at a high standard and is of a high standard. We need to keep on demonstrating new ways of working, and we need to engage and collaborate to make sure that we actually deliver some of the things that John Swinney was talking about previously, but deliver that vibrant rural economy, to deliver that high quality conversation, to make sure that the visitor experience for people coming to the park is still very high. So I thank you for your time this morning, and that's me done.